In the winter of 1892, the wealthiest doctors in Europe had all agreed on one tragedy. Prince Leo Valmont, the heir to the Duchy of Gravendal, was hopelessly blind. They said his corneas had calcified due to a rare genetic curse. But they were wrong. When Clara Sterling, a disgraced nurse with nothing left to lose, walked into that nursery, she didn't see a disease. She saw a crime. What she found covering the boy's eyes wasn't natural tissue. It was a man-made horror that had been applied, layer by microscopic layer, for 3 years. When she finally peeled it away, the scream that echoed through the palace didn't come from the child. It came from the woman who had put it there. This is the true, untold story of the blindness of Leo Valmont. The carriage rattled violently against the cobblestones of the driveway, the wheels splashing through mud that looked as dark as oil under the moonlight. Clara Sterling tightened her grip on her modest leather satchel. It contained everything she owned in the world: 2 grey dresses, a Bible, and a stolen letter of recommendation she had forged to get this job. She looked out the rain-streaked window at Valmont Hall. It wasn't a home. It was a fortress of jagged stone silhouetted against a bruised purple sky. This was where the scandalous prince lived. Prince Henri Valmont, a man known across the continent not for his wealth, which was vast, but for his sorrow. 3 years ago, his wife had died in a riding accident. A week later, his 4-year-old son, Leo, had gone blind. The heavy oak doors groaned open before Clara even knocked. Standing there was a woman who looked as if she had been carved from the same grey stone as the castle. "You are late, Miss Sterling," the woman said. This was Mrs. Harrow, the head housekeeper. Her voice sounded like dry leaves scraping together. "The storm, Mrs. Harrow. The bridge was nearly washed out." Clara apologized, stepping into the foyer. It smelled of beeswax, damp wool, and something else, something distinctively medicinal, like crushed lilies and opium. "Excuses are a poor way to begin a tenure at Valmont Hall," Mrs. Harrow snapped. "Leave your bag. You will meet the master immediately. He does not like to be kept waiting, and he has fired the last 4 nannies in less than a month. Do try to last the night." Clara was marched down a corridor lined with portraits of ancestors who seemed to glare at her. They reached a set of double doors. Mrs. Harrow knocked once, then pushed them open. The library was dim, lit only by the dying embers of a fireplace. Standing by the window, staring out into the rain, was Prince Henri. He was taller than Clara expected, his shoulders broad but slumped with a weight that had nothing to do with gravity. When he turned, the firelight caught the sharp angles of his face, high cheekbones, a jaw that was tight with tension, and eyes that were a piercing, icy blue. But they were dead eyes. Not blind, just empty. "So," Henri said, his voice a low baritone that vibrated in Clara's chest. "Another one. Tell me, Miss Sterling, do you believe in miracles?" Clara straightened her spine. "I believe in science, Your Highness, and I believe in care." Henri let out a dry, humourless laugh. "Science failed my son. God failed my son. All that is left is maintenance. You are here to ensure he does not hurt himself in the darkness. You are not here to cure him. Is that understood?" "I understand my duties, sir." "Do you?" He walked closer, looming over her. "Leo is fragile. His eyes are sensitive to the light. He wears bandages during the day. He must never be exposed to direct sun. And under no circumstances are you to interfere with his medical treatments administered by Lady Isabel." At the mention of the name, the air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Lady Isabel d'Artois, the cousin of the late princess, the woman who had moved in to help the grieving prince and never left. The rumours in the village whispered that she was already acting as the Duchess in all but name. "I understand," Clara repeated, though a prickle of unease ran down her spine. "May I see the boy?" "He is asleep," Henri said, turning back to the window. "Go to your quarters. You start at dawn. And Miss Sterling, do not look the boy in the eyes. It upsets him." Clara left the room, her heart hammering. Do not look him in the eyes. It was a strange command for a father to give. She didn't go to her room. Clara Sterling had not forged a recommendation letter and travelled 300 miles just to sleep. She had been trained at St. Jude's Hospital in London before the incident that ruined her career. She had an instinct for sickness, and the air in this house reeked of it. She waited until the hallway was empty, then slipped off her boots. Moving silently in her stocking feet, she climbed the servants' stairs to the 3rd floor, the nursery wing. The door to the young prince's room was ajar. A single candle burned on the bedside table. Clara crept inside. The room was stiflingly hot. The windows were nailed shut and covered with heavy velvet drapes. In the center of the massive bed, a small figure lay curled up. Leo. He was 7 years old now, but he looked 5, pale, thin, with hair the same dark shade as his father's. Clara approached the bed. The boy was breathing in shallow, raspy hitches. He was having a nightmare. "No," he whimpered in his sleep. "No, the stinging. Please, Auntie, no more wax." Clara froze. "Wax?" She leaned closer. The boy's eyelids were fluttering. Slowly, gently, Clara reached out. She knew she was disobeying a direct order from the Prince of Gravendal within her first hour of employment. She didn't care. She pulled the candle closer. With her thumb, she gently lifted the boy's right eyelid. What she saw made her gasp, a sound she quickly stifled with her hand. Leo's eye wasn't just cloudy. It wasn't the milky white of cataracts or the dead grey of nerve damage. The surface of his eye looked textured. It was dull, like frosted glass. But what shocked Clara was the rim of the iris. There was a tiny, microscopic ridge where the white of the eye met the cornea. It looked like a layer of something had been painted over the eye. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small magnifying glass she always carried. She peered closer. There was a substance there, a transparent, hardened film. Suddenly, the floorboards creaked behind her. "I thought I told you," a smooth, venomous voice whispered, "that the boy was asleep." Clara spun around. Standing in the doorway, holding a silver candelabra, was a woman of stunning, terrifying beauty. She wore a silk dressing gown that cost more than Clara's entire life's earnings. Her blonde hair was cascading down her back, and her green eyes were sharp as daggers. "Lady Isabel." I heard him crying," Clara stammered, hiding the magnifying glass behind her back. "I was just checking his temperature." Isabel glided into the room like a viper sensing prey. She didn't look at Leo. She looked only at Clara. "We have a specific protocol for Leo's night terrors. He requires his medicine, not the coddling of a servant." Isabel walked to the bedside table. There was a small crystal vial there. She uncorked it, and the smell hit Clara instantly. The same smell she had noticed in the foyer. Crushed lilies and chemical acridity. "What is that?" Clara asked, unable to stop herself. "A sedative," Isabel said coldly. Dr. Moreau, the specialist from Paris, prescribed it. It soothes the pain in his eyes. Isabel poured a drop of the liquid onto a cloth and pressed it over the sleeping boy's nose and mouth. Leo didn't wake up. He just went limp, his breathing deepening into a drugged stupor. "Get out," Isabel whispered, her back to Clara. "If I find you in here at night again, You won't just be fired, Miss Sterling. I will ensure you are arrested for trespassing." Clara backed out of the room, her heart racing faster than it ever had. She hurried down the hall to her small attic room. She locked the door and leaned against it, shaking. She had seen enough medical conditions to know what blindness looked like. She knew what cataracts looked like. She knew what glaucoma looked like. Leo Valmont didn't have a disease. Someone was doing something to his eyes. Clara sat at her small desk and pulled out her journal. She dipped her quill in ink and wrote the date, October 14th, 1892. Underneath, she wrote a single sentence. "The boy is not blind. He is being buried alive behind a wall of glass, and his father is holding the shovel." The next morning, the sun tried to break through the eternal grey clouds of Montverité, but inside Valmont Hall it remained twilight. Clara was up before the servant's bell rang. She dressed in her crispest uniform, pinned her hair back severely, and prepared for war. She found Leo in the nursery, sitting on a rug, running his hands over a wooden toy soldier. He was wearing a black silk blindfold. "Good morning, Leo," Clara said softly. The boy flinched, dropping the toy. "Who is that? Is that the new one?" "I'm Clara. I'm your nanny." "You smell like rain," Leo said, tilting his head. "The last one smelled like onions. Are you going to leave too?" "Not for a long time," Clara promised. She sat down on the floor next to him, something the other staff clearly never did. "Leo, can I ask you something? Why do you wear the blindfold inside?" "Aunt Isabel says the light hurts my sickness," he recited, his voice monotone, as if he had been trained to say it. "She says if I take it off, my eyes will melt." Clara felt a surge of nausea. "That sounds very scary." "It is. Every morning she puts the drops in. They sting. They burn like fire. But she says the burning means it's working. It means the bad spirits are being washed away." Clara's mind raced. Burning drops, a hardened layer. "Leo," Clara whispered, glancing at the door. "Can I see your eyes? Just for a second. I promise I won't let the light hurt you." Leo shook his head violently, clutching the blindfold. "No, she checks. She checks the knot. If you untie it, she'll know." Before Clara could press him, the door swung open. It wasn't Isabel this time, but Prince Henri. He was dressed for riding, wearing high boots and a heavy coat. He looked less formidable in the daylight, but more tired. "Miss Sterling," he nodded curtly. "Leo." "Father," Leo said, his voice small. He didn't move toward the prince. He sat frozen. Henry looked at his son with a mixture of love and unbearable pain. He couldn't stand to look at the boy for long. It was easier to look away than to see the ruin of his heir. "I am going to the village," Henri said. "I will return for dinner. Miss Sterling, take him for a walk in the covered garden. The doctor says fresh air is good for his lungs, provided he remains shaded." "Your Highness," Clara stood up, "may I speak with you?" "Regarding Leo's treatment." Henry paused, his hand on the doorknob. His jaw tightened. "I told you last night, I do not discuss medical matters with the staff." "It's just that—" Clara stepped forward, risking everything. "I observed Leo's eyes last night. The tissue. It doesn't look like organic deterioration. It looks like an obstruction." Henry turned fully, his eyes blazing. "Are you a doctor, Miss Sterling?" "I was a surgical nurse for 5 years, sir." "A nurse. Not a specialist. We have had Dr. Moreau, the finest ophthalmologist in France, examine him monthly for 3 years. Do you think you know more than him?" "I think sometimes experts see what they expect to see," Clara argued. "Has Dr. Moreau ever touched the eye? Or does he just look?" "Enough!" Henry barked. The sound made Leo curl into a ball on the floor. Henri saw his son flinch, and his face softened, guilt washing over his features. He lowered his voice. "Clara, I have watched my son scream in agony while doctors probed and poked him. I have promised him no more pain. Isabel's treatment is the only thing that keeps the infection from spreading to his brain. That is what Dr. Moreau said. If we stop the drops, he dies. Do you want my son to die?" "No, sir," Clara whispered. "Then do your job. Feed him. Read to him. But do not play doctor." Henri stormed out. Clara stood fuming. Infection spreading to the brain? It was nonsense. Medical gibberish designed to terrify a grieving father into compliance. She spent the afternoon in the covered garden with Leo. As she read to him from a book of fables, she watched him. He rubbed his eyes constantly beneath the blindfold. "It itches," he complained. "It feels like sand." Clara made a decision. She needed a sample. "Leo," she said playfully, "I have a game, but we have to be very quiet." "I'm good at being quiet," Leo said sadly. "I'm going to lift the corner of your blindfold, just a tiny bit, and I'm going to wipe your tear duct with a handkerchief, just to get the sand out." Leo hesitated. "Will it burn?" "No, I promise." Clara carefully lifted the black silk. The boy's eyes were rheumy and irritated. She saw it again, that strange, glassy sheen over the pupil. It caught the light oddly, like a layer of varnish. She took a clean linen handkerchief and didn't wipe the tear duct. Instead, she quickly, lightly scraped the corner of his eye with her fingernail, catching a tiny flake of the substance near his eyelashes. Leo gasped. "Ow!" Sorry, just a piece of dust," Clara soothed, dropping the blindfold back instantly. She looked at her fingernail. Beneath the fingernail was a tiny, translucent flake. It wasn't mucus. It was hard. Waxy. She transferred the flake into her handkerchief and folded it tight. Later that evening, while Leo napped, Clara went to the kitchen. She needed to know what this was. She found an old copper spoon and a candle. Ensuring she was alone, she placed the tiny flake on the spoon and held it over the flame. If it was dried biological matter, it would char and smell like burning hair. If it was calcification, it wouldn't do anything. Clara held her breath. The flame licked the bottom of the spoon. Within seconds, the flake didn't burn. It melted. It turned into a clear, golden liquid that smelled faintly of pine resin and honey. Clara nearly dropped the spoon. Beeswax. It was a mixture of beeswax and something else, likely a drying agent or a mild adhesive like tree sap. They weren't treating his eyes. They were coating them. Every day, Lady Isabel was applying a layer of liquid wax that hardened over the cornea. Over 3 years, the layers had built up, creating a perfect, opaque cataract that blocked all light. It was brilliant. It was evil. And it was totally reversible. But why? Clara heard voices in the corridor. She blew out the candle and hid the spoon. She crept toward the servants' dining hall, listening. It was Mrs. Vance and a man with a heavy French accent. "The prince is getting restless, Isabel," the man said. Clara recognized the voice. It wasn't a servant. It sounded educated, arrogant. It had to be Dr. Moreau. "He is weak, Jean-Luc," Isabel's voice replied. "He is broken by grief. As long as the boy remains an invalid, Henri will never remarry. He believes he is cursed. He will leave the estate management to me." "And the boy?" the doctor asked. "The layers are getting thick. If we continue much longer, the pressure might actually damage the optic nerve permanently." "Let it," Isabel hissed. "If he goes truly blind, it saves us the trouble of the wax. Once Henri signs the executorship over to me, next month, on Leo's 8th birthday, claiming the boy as unfit to rule. We won't need the charade anymore. Clara pressed her hand over her mouth. It was a coup, a slow-motion coup, using a child's body as the battlefield. Isabel wanted the duchy. She needed the heir incapacitated to get it. Clara backed away, her mind reeling. She had the proof. She knew the method. But she was a nobody, a servant with a forged reference. If she went to Prince Henri now, Isabel and the doctor would call her a liar. They would say she was crazy. They might even kill her. She needed to show him. She needed to remove the wax. But to remove 3 years of hardened wax from a child's eyes without damaging them, she would need a solvent. Something to dissolve the wax without burning the eye. She needed oil. Warm, sterile almond oil. And she needed time. But time was running out. Isabel had mentioned the prince signing the papers next month. Clara returned to the nursery. She looked at the sleeping boy. "I'm going to give you the world back, Leo," she whispered into the dark, "even if I have to burn this house down to do it." But Clara didn't know that the house had eyes too. From the shadows of the hallway, Mrs. Harrow, the housekeeper, watched Clara leave the kitchen. She looked at the spoon Clara had left on the counter, sniffed the melted wax, and her eyes narrowed. She turned and walked straight toward Lady Isabel's chambers. The walls of Volmont Hall seemed to breathe. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the velvet drapes felt like a warning. Clara Sterling knew she was being watched. Since the night in the kitchen, Mrs. Harrow's gaze had followed her like a physical weight, cold and heavy on her shoulders. But Clara had a mission. For 3 nights, she had been secretly preparing. She had pilfered a small bottle of pure olive oil from the pantry and a bundle of soft cotton lint from the sewing room. She hid them inside the hollow leg of the nursery's rocking chair. The real challenge was Prince Henri. On Thursday, 2 days after her discovery, Clara found herself in the library again. The prince was pacing, a glass of brandy in his hand. The storm outside had passed, leaving a heavy, suffocating fog that pressed against the windows. "You look troubled, Your Highness," Clara said, placing a tray of tea on the desk. She hadn't been summoned, but she needed to gauge him. She needed to know if he was truly blind to Isabel's wickedness or just paralyzed by grief. Henri stopped pacing. He looked at her, his blue eyes bloodshot. "The lawyers arrive in 3 days, Miss Sterling. I am to sign the papers declaring Leo unfit to inherit. The title will pass to my cousin and the estate management to Lady Isabel until he passes." "Passes?" Clara asked, her blood running cold. "He is a healthy boy, sir, apart from his eyes." Henri slammed his glass down. "He is fading. Can't you see it? He eats nothing. He sleeps all day. The darkness is eating him from the inside out." He slumped into his chair, putting his head in his hands. "I failed his mother. Now I am failing him. I just want him to have peace. Isabel says the stress of the title will kill him." Clara took a step forward. This was dangerous ground. "Isabel says many things. But what does a father's heart say?" Henri looked up, surprised by her boldness. "My heart is dead, Miss Sterling." "I don't believe that," Clara said softly. "I see how you look at him. You are afraid to hope. But hope is a discipline, sir. It is a muscle. You must exercise it, or it withers." For a moment, the prince looked at her not as a servant, but as a woman. There was a spark of something, curiosity, perhaps even admiration in his gaze. But before he could speak, the library doors opened. Lady Isabel swept in, bringing the scent of chemical lilies with her. "Henri, darling," she cooed, ignoring Clara entirely. "Dr. Moreau has arrived. It is time for Leo's treatment. Henri's face closed up again. The mask of misery returned. Go, Miss Sterling. Check on the linens. Clara left, but she didn't go to the linen closet. She went straight to the nursery. She had to act now. If Dr. Moreau was here, they would be adding another layer of the wax. They would be sealing the boy's sight even further before the lawyers arrived. She hid in the small alcove connecting the nursery to the governess's quarters, peering through the crack in the door. She watched as Dr. Moreau, a short man with trembling hands and watery eyes, held Leo's head. Isabel stood by, holding the vial. "It burns!" Leo cried out, as Moreau pried his eye open. "No, please, it burns!" "Shh, little prince," Moreau muttered. "Pain is the medicine working." Isabel dropped the thick, viscous liquid into the boy's eye. Leo screamed, a high, thin sound that tore at Clara's heart. She had to bite her own hand to keep from rushing in and scratching Isabel's eyes out. They did this for 10 minutes. By the time they left, Leo was sobbing quietly, his eyes bandaged tight, heavily sedated with the poppy syrup. Clara waited an hour until the house was silent. She entered the nursery. She locked the door. She wedged a chair under the handle. "Leo," she whispered, shaking him gently. "Leo, wake up." The boy was groggy. "Go away. It hurts." "I know," Clara said, her voice trembling with rage and determination. "I know it hurts, but I'm going to fix it. Do you trust me?" "You smell like rain," he mumbled, a callback to their first meeting. "Yes, I'm going to wash the sand away, Leo, but you must be very brave. You must not scream, or they will stop me." Clara lit a single candle and placed it far across the room. She poured the olive oil into a small bowl she had warmed near the fireplace. It was tepid, soothing. She removed the bandages. The fresh layer of wax was still tacky, irritating the rim of his eyelids. "This will feel oily," she whispered. She dipped a cotton swab into the oil and began. It was painstaking work. She couldn't just peel it off. She had to dissolve the bond. She worked on the left eye first. She saturated the lashes, the lid, and gently, oh so gently, rubbed the oil over the cloudy surface of the cornea. Leo whimpered, his hands gripping the sheets. "It feels slippery." "Good," Clara murmured. "Keep still." 10 minutes passed, then 20. Clara's back ached, her eyes strained in the dim light. Then it happened. The oil had worked its way under the edge of the wax deposit near the tear duct. The seal broke. A tiny corner of the film lifted. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. She took a pair of sterilized tweezers she had boiled in the kitchen water. "Leo, hold your breath." She gripped the tiny flap of the artificial cataract. With the steady hands of the surgical nurse she was born to be, she pulled. Slowly, it came away in a single, cohesive sheet. It looked like a contact lens made of cloudy gelatin. It peeled off the boy's eye with a wet, sucking sound. Underneath, Leo's iris was revealed. It wasn't grey, it wasn't cloudy. It was a brilliant, shocking hazel green. Leo gasped. He blinked rapidly. Tears, real tears, not the gummy discharge from the wax, flooded his eye, washing away the residue. "Miss Clara," he whispered. "I'm here, Leo. My eye." He reached up to touch it. "It feels cold. The air touches it." "Look," Clara commanded, pointing him toward the candle across the room. "Leo, look at the light." The boy turned his head. He squinted. His eye, unused to stimulation for 3 years, watered profusely. But then, a slow, wondrous smile spread across his pale face. "A star," he breathed. "I see a star." Clara covered her mouth to stifle a sob. He could see. The cornea was intact. The wax had actually protected his eye from the outside world, preserving it like a fly in amber. Yes, she wept silently. It's a star. I can see the blanket, Leo said, his voice rising in excitement. I can see my hand. Hush, Clara hissed, grabbing his hands. Leo, listen to me. This is our secret. Our life and death secret. You cannot tell Aunt Isabel. You cannot tell your father. Not yet. Why? I want to tell Papa, I can see. If you tell them, Clara said intensely, gripping his small shoulders, Isabel will put the burning drops back in. She will put them in forever. Do you understand? The terror returned to Leo's face. He nodded vigorously. I won't tell. I promise. We have to put the bandage back on, Clara said, her heart breaking at the necessity. We have to pretend you are still blind. Tomorrow night, I will do the other eye. And then we will tell your father, together. She rebandaged his eyes, hiding the miracle she had just wrought. She tucked the piece of hardened wax into her locket, snapping it shut. Evidence. She unlocked the door and removed the chair. She turned to leave, feeling triumphant. But as she opened the door, she found herself face to chest with a wall of black wool. Mrs. Harrow stood there, and behind her, holding a lantern that cast long, demonic shadows, was Prince Henry. What were you doing with the door locked, Miss Sterling? Henry asked. His voice was cold, colder than she had ever heard it. Clara froze. She looked at Harrow, who wore a smug, triumphant sneer. I was singing to him, sir. He was frightened. I didn't want the noise to disturb the household. Singing? Mrs. Harrow croaked. I heard no singing. I heard whispering, and I saw you steal oil from the kitchen. Henry stepped into the room. He looked at the sleeping boy, then at the bowl of oil on the bedside table. He dipped a finger in it. Oil, Henry said. Why are you putting cooking oil on my son's eyes? Clara's mind raced. If she told him now, would he believe her? Or would he think she was experimenting on the boy, just as he feared? It is an old remedy, sir, she lied, desperate. For the itching, the crusts around his lashes. I was just softening them. Henri stared at her for a long, agonizing moment. The connection they had felt in the library was gone, replaced by the suspicion of a protective father. You are on thin ice, Miss Sterling, he growled. Isabel warned me you were overstepping. She said you have a history of mental instability. That is why you were dismissed from St. Jude's. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. Isabel had dug into her past. She knew about the incident, where Clara had accused a senior surgeon of malpractice and been branded a hysteric. That is not true, sir, Clara whispered. Leave this room, Henri commanded. If you touch my son with anything unapproved by Dr. Moreau again, you will be removed from the grounds by the constabulary. Do you understand? Yes, Your Highness. Clara fled, but as she ran down the hall, her hand clutched the locket at her throat. She had lost his trust, but she had saved one eye. The game had changed. Isabel knew Clara was a threat. The mention of St. Jude's proved it. Isabel wasn't just going to fire her. She was going to destroy her. The next morning, the atmosphere in Valmont Hall was suffocating. The servants wouldn't look Clara in the eye. They whispered in corners, falling silent whenever she passed. She's mad, Clara heard a maid whisper. Lady Isabel said she tried to blind the boy permanently with hot oil. The rumour mill was Isabel's most powerful weapon. She was poisoning the house against Clara, just as she was poisoning the prince's mind. Clara spent the morning in the nursery, under strict supervision. Mrs. Harrow sat in the corner, knitting, her beady eyes never leaving Clara's hands. Leo was acting perfectly. He sat still, feigning blindness, but every time Mrs. Harrow looked down at her knitting, Leo would flash Clara a tiny, secret smile and wiggle his fingers, tracking the movement of a fly, buzzing near the window. He could see. It gave Clara the strength to endure the hostility. At noon, the bell rang for the midday meal. Mrs. Harrow stood up. "The master wishes to see the boy in the dining hall. You are to bring him down, and you are to wait outside." Clara guided Leo down the grand staircase. "Remember," she whispered in his ear, "don't look at things. Look straight ahead." "I know," Leo whispered back. In the dining hall, a long table was set. Prince Henry sat at the head. Lady Isabel sat to his right, looking radiant in emerald green silk. Dr. Moreau was there as well, looking nervous. "Bring him here," Henri said. Clara walked Leo to his chair and helped him sit. She stepped back, intending to leave as ordered. "Wait," Isabel said. Her voice was like silk wrapped around a razor blade. "Miss Sterling, please stay. We have a matter to discuss." Clara stopped. Her stomach churned. "Dr. Moreau has brought some disturbing news," Isabel continued, pouring wine for Henry. "He analyzed the residue on Leo's bandages this morning. He found traces of a corrosive substance." Henry looked up, his face pale. "Corrosive?" "Yes," Dr. Moreau stammered, avoiding Clara's eyes. A mild acid. Vinegar and perhaps bleach." "Liar," Clara shouted. She couldn't help it. "That is a lie." "Silence," Henri roared, slamming his fist on the table. The silverware rattled. "Let him speak." "The boy's condition has worsened overnight," Isabel said sadly, placing a hand on Henry's arm. "The inflammation is severe. Miss Sterling, we found a bottle of vinegar in your room this morning, hidden under your mattress." "You planted it," Clara cried, stepping forward. "Your Highness, please, look at them. They are lying to you. They are not treating him. They are blinding him to steal your estate." "That is a monstrous accusation," Isabel gasped, clutching her pearls. "Henri, she is hysterical, just like at the hospital." "I am not hysterical." Clara turned to the prince. "Sir, ask yourself, why does the treatment never end? Why does Dr. Moreau never let you look closely at the eyes? Why is the boy sedated every night?" "Because he is in pain," Henry shouted. He stood up, towering over the table. "Pain that you seem to be causing." "No!" Clara ran to Leo's side. "Leo, tell him! Tell your father what happened last night." Leo looked terrified. He turned his head from Isabel to his father. He saw Isabel's hand tighten around the steak knife on the table. He saw the cold promise of punishment in her eyes. "Leo, please," Clara begged. "Tell him about the star." Leo began to tremble. I... Don't be afraid, Leo," Isabel said softly. "Tell Papa the truth. Did she put something in your eye that hurt?" Leo burst into tears. He was 7 years old. He was terrified of the woman who had tortured him for 3 years. "I don't know," Leo wailed. "I just want it to stop. I just want my mommy." Isabel looked at Henri with tragic resignation. "You see, she is tormenting him." Henri's face hardened into a mask of stone. "Mrs. Harrow, call the guards." "No!" Clara grabbed the back of Leo's chair. "Sir, I have proof in my locket." She fumbled for the silver locket around her neck. She needed to show him the piece of wax. But before she could open it, Mrs. Harrow, who had been waiting by the door, lunged forward and grabbed Clara's arms. 2 footmen rushed in. "Get her out of here," Henry said, turning his back on her. "Lock her in the cellar until the constable arrives from the village. I will press charges for assault on a minor." "Henri, look at me!" Clara screamed as she was dragged backward. "Look at his eyes! Just look at his eyes!" They dragged her out of the dining hall. Her heels skidded on the marble floor. As the heavy doors slammed shut, sealing her fate, Clara saw one last thing. She saw Leo lift his head. He wasn't looking at the sound of the door. He was looking directly at the tear falling down his father's cheek. He reached out a hand and accurately, perfectly, touched his father's face. Henri was too distraught to notice. But Isabelle noticed. Isabelle's eyes narrowed. She saw the boy's hand find its mark without fumbling. She looked from the boy to the closed door. She realized Clara had succeeded. The boy could see. And that meant the boy had to die. Tonight, Clara was thrown into the coal cellar. The darkness was absolute. She fell onto the pile of coal, coughing, her uniform ruined. She heard the heavy iron bolt slide shut. She was trapped, disgraced, and soon to be arrested. But in the darkness of the cellar, Clara didn't cry. She felt for the locket. It was still there. They hadn't taken it. She had the wax. She had the truth. And she knew something Isabelle didn't know. The cellar had a coal chute, a narrow, filthy, vertical tunnel that led to the garden. Clara Sterling was not going to wait for the constable. She stood up, wiping the coal dust from her face. "You made a mistake. Isabelle," she whispered to the damp walls. "You didn't kill me." She began to climb. The darkness of the coal cellar was absolute, a suffocating blanket that smelled of ancient dust and carbon. But Clara Sterling didn't fear the dark. She feared the light that was currently shining in the nursery, a light that she knew Leo was seeing for the first time in years, and which put him in mortal danger. Clara groped along the rough stone walls until her hands found the iron opening of the coal chute. It was a narrow, angled tunnel, barely 2 feet wide, slick with black dust. It led upward to the service courtyard. She jammed her boot against the brickwork and pushed. It was a nightmare ascent. The chute was steep and slippery. Every inch she gained was a battle against gravity and grime. Coal dust filled her nose and mouth, choking her. Her fingernails tore against the masonry as she clawed her way up. "I cannot die here," she told herself, the image of Leo's hazel-green eye flashing in her mind. "I cannot let him die in the dark." After what felt like an eternity, her hand struck a metal grate. It was heavy, covered in wet leaves. With a primal grunt of effort, Clara shoved it upward. Cold rain hit her face. She hauled herself out of the ground, collapsing onto the wet cobblestones of the service yard. She looked like a creature from the underworld, covered head to toe in black soot, her uniform torn, her hands bleeding. She was no longer the prim nurse. She was an avenging shadow. She scrambled to her feet and looked toward the house. The windows of the nursery were glowing with an ominous, flickering orange light. Inside the nursery, the atmosphere was thick with a different kind of tension. Lady Isabel stood by the fireplace. She had dismissed Mrs. Harrow. She was alone with the boy. "Leo," she said softly, holding a lit candle in front of his face. "Look at me." Leo sat on the bed, trembling. He remembered Clara's warning. "Don't let them know you can see." He stared blankly ahead, trying to focus his eyes on the wall behind her. But the flame, it danced. It was beautiful and terrifying. His left eye, the one Clara had cleaned, twitched involuntarily, tracking the movement of the light. Isabel smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You can see it, can't you?" she whispered. "No," Leo lied, his voice shaking. "I see nothing. Only the dark." "Liar!" Isabel hissed. She moved the candle suddenly to the left. Leo flinched. Isabel blew out the candle. The room plunged into gloom, lit only by the dying fire in the hearth. "It's a pity," she sighed, walking toward the window. "If you were truly blind, you might have lived a long, quiet life in the dark. But a sighted heir, a boy who can point a finger, A boy who can testify? She reached into the pocket of her silk dress and pulled out a key. She went to the door and locked it from the inside. Then she snapped the key into the lock, jamming it so it couldn't be opened from the other side. "What are you doing, Auntie?" Leo asked, shrinking back against the headboard. "We are going to have an accident, Leo," she said, matter-of-factly. She walked to the heavy velvet drapes that covered the windows, the drapes that had kept the sun out for 3 years. She picked up a bottle of high-proof brandy from the side table, Henry's brandy, and splashed it onto the fabric. The liquid soaked in, dark and pungent. "Fire is a tragic thing," Isabel murmured. "It takes everything. It leaves no evidence, no wax, no eyes, just ash." She struck a match. "No!" Leo screamed, scrambling off the bed. Isabel dropped the match. The brandy-soaked velvet caught instantly. A sheet of flame roared up the wall, eating the dry fabric with a terrifying hunger. "Goodbye, little prince," Isabel said. She turned to the secret servant's passage that led to her own chambers, a door she intended to slip through, leaving Leo trapped. But when she tried the handle, it wouldn't turn. She frowned and rattled it. Locked. She spun around. Standing in the main doorway, the one she had jammed, was a figure. But the door hadn't been opened. It had been smashed. A heavy iron fire poker lay on the floor, and standing amidst the splintered wood was a woman coated in black soot, her eyes burning white in a face of darkness. Clara Sterling had returned from the grave. "Get away from him!" Clara screamed, her voice raw with smoke and rage. Isabel gasped, backing toward the fire. You're supposed to be in the cellar!" "I crawled out," Clara growled, stepping into the burning room, "to drag you back to hell." The fire was spreading fast. The heat was already blistering, the smoke pooling at the ceiling like a thunderhead. "Clara!" Leo cried, coughing. "Come here, Leo!" Clara shouted, opening her arms. Leo ran to her, burying his face in her soot-stained skirt. Clara wrapped one arm around him, shielding him. With her other hand, she pointed a shaking finger at Isabel. "Open the secret door," Clara commanded. "We are getting out, all of us." "Never!" Isabel shrieked. The madness had fully taken her now. She grabbed a heavy porcelain vase from the mantel. "He dies tonight, and you with him!" She lunged. Isabel was taller and heavier, but Clara was fueled by the adrenaline of a mother protecting her young. As Isabel swung the vase, Clara ducked. The porcelain shattered against the doorframe. Clara drove her shoulder into Isabel's stomach, sending the noblewoman stumbling back toward the burning drapes. "Help! Murder! Fire!" Isabel screamed, twisting the narrative even as she fought. From the hallway, footsteps thundered, heavy boots kicking at the debris. "Leo! Isabel!" It was Prince Henry. He appeared in the broken doorway, his face pale with horror. He saw the flames licking the ceiling. He saw Clara, covered in soot, holding his son. He saw Isabel on the floor near the fire. "She did it!" Isabel screamed, pointing at Clara. "The nurse! She's mad! She set the fire to kill us all! Henri, shoot her!" Henri froze. He looked at the scene. It was chaos. Who to believe? The woman he had trusted for years, or the disgraced nurse he had locked in a cellar? "Henri, save me!" Isabel wailed, crawling toward him. She tried to burn Leo. Henry took a step toward Clara, his fists clenched. "Miss Sterling, put the boy down." "No," Clara said. She didn't shout. She spoke with a calm that cut through the roar of the fire. "I will not put him down until you look at him." "We have to get out," Henri yelled. "The roof is going to collapse." "Look at him." Clara grabbed Leo's chin and forced his face toward his father. "Leo, tell him what you see." The smoke was thick, stinging their eyes. But Leo looked at his father, standing 10 feet away in the doorway. He looked at the coat of arms on Henri's jacket. "I see the lion," Leo choked out. Henri stopped. "What?" "The lion!" Leo cried, pointing at the silver embroidery on Henri's chest. "On your pocket, the silver lion holding the sword. And you're crying again, Papa." The world seemed to stop for Henri Valmont. He looked down at his chest. The silver crest was small, intricate. A blind boy could never have known it was there. He had never described it to Leo. He looked back at his son's eyes. One was still cloudy, but the other, the left one, was clear. It was bright. It was seeing. "Leo," Henri whispered, falling to his knees. "She fixed me," Leo sobbed. "Clara washed the wax away. Isabel put wax in my eyes, Papa. It wasn't sickness, it was wax." The truth hit Henri like a physical blow. The years of doctors, the sedatives, the treatments that made Leo scream, the sunglasses, the lies. He slowly turned his head toward Isabel. Isabel had stopped screaming. She was standing up, pressing herself against the burning wall, her face a mask of terror. She knew. It was over. "Henri," she stammered. "The boy is confused. The smoke." "You stole 3 years of his life," Henri said. His voice was low, terrifyingly quiet. "You stole the sun from him." "I did it for us," Isabel cried, her facade crumbling. "You were weak. You were going to let the duchy fall to ruin. I was the only one strong enough to rule." She glanced at the window. The fire had eaten the sash. The glass was gone. It was a 3-story drop to the cobblestones. "Don't move," Henri commanded, standing up. But Isabelle d'Artois would not be taken by guards. She looked at Henri one last time with pure hatred. "You never deserved me," she spat. Then she turned and ran. Not toward the door, but toward the burning window. She leaped into the night, vanishing into the smoke and rain. "Isabel!" Henri shouted, rushing forward. "Sir, the roof!" Clara screamed. A massive wooden beam, eaten through by the flames, groaned and cracked above them. Henri spun around. He grabbed Leo in one arm and grabbed Clara's hand with the other. "Run!" They dove into the hallway just as the nursery ceiling collapsed with a thunderous crash, burying the secrets of the wax and the pain in a tomb of fiery rubble. 3 days later, the storm had finally broken. The sky over the Duchy of Gravendal was a piercing, brilliant blue, the kind of winter sky that hurts to look at. But Leo Valmont was looking at it. He sat on a bench in the lower gardens, wearing a thick wool coat. There were no bandages on his eyes. There were no dark glasses. He held a book in his lap. But he wasn't reading. He was watching a red cardinal hop across the snow. "It's red," Leo said, his voice filled with wonder. "It's so red it looks like it's burning." Clara Sterling sat beside him. She was clean now, though her hands were bandaged from the burns she had sustained during the escape. She wore a new dress, one of fine blue wool that brought out the color of her eyes. "That is a cardinal," Clara explained. "They stay all winter." "And the sky," Leo said, tilting his head back. "It goes on forever." "Yes," Clara smiled, tears pricking her eyes. "It does." She had finished the procedure on his right eye yesterday. It had been easier this time, with Dr. Moreau in custody, caught trying to board a ship to America, and the proper medical supplies available. Leo's vision was imperfect, slightly blurry from years of disuse, but the doctor said it would correct itself with time. He was whole. Footsteps crunched on the gravel. Prince Henri approached. He looked different. The weight that had bowed his shoulders for 3 years was gone. He looked like the man in the portraits again, strong, vital. He stopped in front of them. He looked at his son, drinking in the sight of the boy's clear, bright eyes. "Papa!" Leo jumped up and ran to him. Henri caught the boy and swung him into the air, burying his face in Leo's neck. "My brave boy, my lion." He set Leo down. "Go run, Leo. Go see everything." Leo laughed and took off, running across the lawn, chasing the cardinal. Henri turned to Clara. He took off his hat, clutching it in his hands. This powerful duke, who commanded armies and estates, looked humble. "Miss Sterling," he began. "Clara." "Your Highness." "I have spoken with the magistrate. Isabel's body was found in the moat. It is finished." Clara nodded slowly. "And Dr. Moreau?" "He has confessed everything. The bribery, the fake diagnosis, the wax compound. He will spend the rest of his life in prison." Henri stepped closer. He reached out and gently took Clara's bandaged hand. "There are no words," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I offered you money. You refused. I offered you a title. You refused. You saved my son's life. You saved my soul. What can I possibly give you that balances the scales?" Clara looked up at him. She saw the man beneath the crown. She saw the loneliness that matched her own. "You don't owe me anything, Henri," she said softly, using his name for the first time. "I didn't do it for a reward. I did it because it was right." "Then stay," Henri said. "Not as a nanny, not as a servant." Clara's breath hitched. "Then as what?" Henri smiled, and for the first time, the ice in his blue eyes melted completely. "As the woman who taught me how to see," he said. "Stay as my companion, my advisor, and perhaps, in time, something more." He raised her bandaged hand to his lips and kissed it. Clara looked out at the garden. She saw Leo running free in the sunlight, his laughter echoing against the ancient stone walls of the castle. She looked back at Henri. She realized that the long winter of Valmont Hall was finally over. "I think," Clara whispered, squeezing his hand, "I would like that very much." And so, the boy who lived in darkness walked into the light, saved not by the finest doctors in Europe, but by the courage of a woman who refused to believe the lie. The story of Leo Valmont remains one of history's most chilling reminders that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones casting the biggest shadows. Prince Henri and Clara eventually married, and Leo grew up to be a reformer who founded the first modern institute for the blind in France, ensuring no child would ever suffer in the dark again. If this story moved you, or if you believe in the power of seeking the truth, no matter the cost, please hit the like button. It truly helps the channel. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a miracle, and subscribe for more incredible true stories from history. Thank you for watching.